So, have you ever heard any stories about religious relics that you'd like to share with us, Vic?
Religious relics. There was a thing on the Shroud of Turin on TV the other day, but it was quite a long time ago, and I'm not really remembering what all it said. The most recent thing that I saw on television about Jesus was another fellow who contended that Jesus was alive, that his death on the cross was actually faked, so that he could escape and not be pursued by the Romans. Now,
it sounds rather weak of him.
Yeah.
Interesting theory,
right.
yes.
That him and his children, the Diocese said that Jesus had children. And his view was that because that would have been one of the first laws of Judaism was be fruitful and multiply. So he, as a reverend or a pastor or whatever they are, that he would have had to have been married and had children. And that was Mary Magdalene was his wife. I don't know enough about this to make much comments, so okay. I want to stay away from that.
That's okay. I mean, you can just make it up as you go along.
Well, that's what they do apparently. So
yes, we had several people. You know, that's how Mormon started. You know, the guy.
Yep, made it all up.
He didn't like what he was doing, so he went out and made it.
However, if I was going to create a religion, the multiple wife thing was probably a good idea.
A while. Well, anyway.
So,
sorry.
Like I said, callers, this is June 7th. We'd love to hear from the callers out there. And today's topic is religious relics in general and the Shroud of Turin in specific, because it just came out. They now just put it back on display again. And from my understanding, the Vatican has agreed to more testing on that. And it's really interesting how they conducted the last test, and I should have marked it. But what the whole deal was, there was only one gentleman that had the samples, and he went into a locked room by himself with these samples, and to accurately calibrate the test, they had other samples mixed in with the shroud mixed in with there. And so this gentleman is the only one that knew which ones were real and which ones were fake. And it was this author's contention that the Vatican put all fakes in there. That's the reason it tested out to 1400s. All the scientists, I think there was actually 3 different universities that did the actual testing, the carbon dating testing, all came back with the same date, the medieval 1400s. And
I mean, what's interesting about that is it's kind of like a backwards excuse. What they did, I think it was 4 universities, I heard.
I'm sorry.
4 of the best universities were handpicked, the best universities throughout the world, handpicked for their ability to accurately date things like this. And so what they found, though, is all 4 of those universities agreed that this was not something from that time period of Jesus. It was obviously much younger, and it was very easy for them to tell that. But this book, I think, is an attempt to come back and say, well, the reason why those 4 universities all together concluded that it was not from that time period of Jesus is because such and such and such, and the conspiracy theorists. But the reality was that the samples were given, and the samples all pointed to a different time period altogether. And I think it's just excuse-making. But it's pathetic because, I mean, this is the Vatican, and, you know, it's one of the richest entities there are, and they themselves went and handpicked universities to analyze the shroud, and all 4 of them proved it to be not the actual shroud of somebody from that time period, the time period of Jesus. So any books like this have got to be considered an excuse. So, apologists.
It's interesting. But my contention is there's no historical proof that they can't prove when Jesus was born. They can't prove when he died. They can't prove, that he was actually a real person. So how can we have supposedly the burial shroud of Jesus if Jesus is not a real person? I can't explain how that image got on that shroud, because they go into great detail how it's a 3-dimensional image and everything else. So it's quite interesting, and science still can't explain what that image is and how that image came to be on that particular cloth. So I would love to hear from Austin. Like I say, this is June 7th. We are live, and I would love to hear your opinions on whether or not you feel the shroud is a real picture of Jesus and represents who he really was at that time.
If I could mention something here.
Arlo?
Go right ahead.
Well, as an artist, I find it that they're trying to make the Shroud of Turin, it's just all spiritual and everything, to keep it special. I find it a much more special item if we can see it as just a wonderful piece of artwork that's way ahead of its time. Because
Yes.
people just didn't paint like that back then. That's the thing that makes it so unique. If
Excellent
we accept
point.
it as that, it's a very special item.
Well, the time of Jesus, then, is what you're referring to.
No,
about
I'm
that
referring to 500 years ago. I mean,
Okay.
there were certainly artists, but not like that.
Yeah, because I understand what you're saying, but Joe was, 500 years ago,
Yeah.
the shroud was nowhere to be seen in history or whatever else until it just all of a sudden appears in, 500 years ago.
Even the Vatican admits that. I
Right.
found that amazing when I found that out.
Yes. Thanks for your input there, Arlo. And, I just thought it was quite funny how much the picture looks like Joe.
Hey, hey, man,
You want to compare?
don't associate me with that, man.
So,
Making Joe nervous here.
I wanted to talk real quick about an apparition that happened in Austin, actually, a few years ago.
sure.
It's not exactly a relic, but an apparition pretty darn close to being that sort of thing. It was in East Austin. I forget what street it was on, but it was basically what it was a small church that was next door to a house in the middle of East Austin neighborhood, and there was a fence around the front, and what it was, there was a security light outside on the church that was shining on the front yard area for security. And there was, in the next adjoining house, there was a wall on the side of the house that a shadow was being projected on by this light. And there was a silhouette that came with the shadow, apparently, and it was a silhouette of Mary. That same generic silhouette, the woman with the clothes on. Anyway, very, very vague and generic and ambiguous. And anyway, it was a shadow. And it drew hundreds of East Austinites. And every night for several weeks, they were having to have the police out there because there were so many people crowded around this house, and it was a dead end, fortunately, on the street. They blocked off the street, and I went and visited it one time. This was a couple of years ago, as I said. And I went to go visit it, and I saw the crowd of people. There must have been 250, 300 people there in the street, and they had the street blocked off, and everybody was there. Many people were praying, and there were rosaries everywhere, and Bibles and all this, and everybody was coming to see this shadow. Well, I went to visit it, and when I had gotten there, what had happened beforehand, earlier that day, was the pastor of that little church got a little fed up and turned the light off. And he didn't like the crowd so much. I mean, it's great for Sundays, but 5, 6, 7 days a week got on his nerves, I guess. And he also didn't happen to think that the shadow was as important as the crucifix inside. So he turned off the light, and people still kept coming. And when I went out there was no shadow to be seen. And, there were lights here and there, but that particular light was out. We went up there, and people were still there, and every bit as reverent and hopeful and believing. And I went up really close to see it. And, no, sure enough, you couldn't see it. It was gone, long gone, and nobody seemed to care about that part. But I saw it, and I kind of laughed, and it was interesting to relate to other people that it was a sham right then and there. And 250 or so people got kind of annoyed. But they couldn't find their shadow, and also there was somebody there saying, "Hey, it's a sham. Damn it, I wanted to see that shadow, and it's a big fraud. Let's get out of here." And I said that kind of inconspicuously, right? And a few people didn't like it. And I kind of turned around and walked away, and it was a good thing, too. But there were more than a few police there, and they were actually having a good time with it. But as I was walking away, I left them scratching their heads saying, "Wait, he's got a point. There ain't no shadow on the wall. Let's go home." So, you got to put a little bit of sense in the people instead of the fear of God. How about that?
Did anyone hear about the apparition in Mexico? I think it was a couple of years ago.
Right.
Someone peed in their hospital bed. It either made the silhouette of Mary or a cross.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't heard that one, no.
I saw it on the Spanish channel running in here.
Okay.
Don't eat the yellow snow. Okay.
But there's several icons out there that supposedly of Jesus crying and statues of Mother Mary crying. I've actually,
The face of God in the clouds as the airplanes pass by.
yes. So we'd love to hear from anyone that actually owns one of these. Or
I have one.
Oh, do
I
you?
have the statue. Well, it's a statue of a donkey, and it looks like it's crying, or some kind of waxy stuff that's over the wood, and it's melting or something. I don't know. And I think maybe it's just the same thing with the other ones.
Whoa, party at Arlo's.
Yes.
That's right.
Let's get
Come
down.
together at Arlo's house.
Yeah.